fellow bookworms. Welcome back to Tippera's Den. My name is Whitney, and we are reading Nora Roberts' Legacy. So if this is your first video, don't worry, we just got started. Last week we read chapters 1 through 4. There's plenty of time for you to pick up this book and join in. Even if you can't get it for a couple weeks, that's perfectly fine. But I'll leave links in the description below where you can pick up this book. And right now it is available at Walmart and Target, so you might still be able to get it there as well. But basically we are reading the book, and then each week we are going to do discussion questions on the chapters we read. So I do want to point out there is going to be spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, you haven't read the book, you're planning on reading it, then definitely, click off this video and come back at a later date. But otherwise, if you don't care about spoilers or you've already read the chapters we are going to be discussing, then please stay on and definitely participate in the discussion questions in the comments below. And also, while you're at it, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell notification so you are notified when I do upload every Monday, and let's go ahead and get started. So I did break down my discussion questions chapter by chapter. I found that to be the easiest. This is the first time I'm doing anything like this, and so that was the easiest for me. And so we're kind of going to go chapter by chapter and discuss specific things. Over on Facebook and my website, we will be doing like a more general discussion at the end of the book, kind of chatting about it as we read it, and then at the end of the book we'll do a discussion covering the whole book and what we thought about it and things like that. So definitely participate over there as well under the same name, Tippera's Den, and I will leave those linked in the description also. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 1, we're introduced to Adrian and her mom Lena and her nanny Mimi. And so she's 7 years old at that point, and so I did some questions based on that chapter. The first one being, based on how 7-year-old Adrian describes their lifestyle, do you think she was happy? And I don't think she was unhappy. I think she was kind of resigned to the lifestyle. You definitely see that she talks about, the 2 weeks she gets to spend at her grandparents' every summer and how, like, she really enjoys that and has a lot of fun. And I think, that just allows her to be a kid when she's there, and that's probably what she enjoys about it, play with dogs and be outside running around and things like that. Where with her mother, it's a lot of travel, and doesn't seem like there's a lot of stability anyway. So I think she's kind of resigned to her lifestyle, and there's definitely aspects that she really enjoys, like, getting to do dance and gymnastics when she's at their home base. And I think other than that, it doesn't really bother her, but it's not her favorite thing either. But let me know what you think based on her description of traveling and such. I do think it's awesome that they include, when they're traveling and doing homeschool, that whatever location they are at, they include that in her education. I think, while she may not appreciate it now, looking back, that's something that's really beneficial and she'll probably appreciate looking back. But that was the first question. Second question is, after reading 7-year-old Adrian's description of her mom, how would you describe their relationship? And I think the relationship is kind of neutral, a little bit distant. I think it's more based on respect than actual love or anything like that. I don't think that her mom doesn't love her, but she's not very nurturing. And even Adrian, points out that her mom doesn't know how to be a mom. And so I think, it's just more kind of, she's like the parental figure or the authority figure. That's what I was trying to get out. Than like a true mom. And so there's definitely respect. And there's things that she points out, her mom doesn't get mad at her for certain things, and she likes the way her mom hair smells and little things like that. But for the most part, I think it's a pretty distant and pretty just structured relationship versus like a close-knit relationship. My next question is, Adrian lets it slip to Detective Riley about getting sundaes when they're supposed to get frozen yogurt. Later on in the chapter, Lena justifies ordering pizza. Do you think it's fair to be so strict with a child? And I think Lena takes it overboard. I definitely think she's a little overboard on it. I do think it's important to set healthy boundaries, and teach healthy habits. But like the Sunday was a special treat, and so it shouldn't be some shameful secret because it's a special treat. It's not like she's eating Sundays all the time. And then the pizza after the traumatic incident is perfectly understandable, but Lena kind of, I guess, feels like she has to justify it. I mean, it's the author, but you know what I mean. And so she kind of is justifying ordering this pizza after this traumatic event. Or at the end of the day, you're making sure your kid has a full tummy, especially after a traumatic event. Uh, Pizza is perfectly acceptable and it doesn't need to be justified. And so I do think she kind of takes it to the extreme, but at the same time, it is important to set healthy boundaries and things like that. So the next question is Lena admits she doesn't know her daughter's bedtime routine. Do you think this makes her a bad mom? And I personally don't think it makes her a bad mom. Um, I think it's damaging to their overall relationship, but like we kind of established, they kind of have like a more neutral relationship, or a relationship built on that she's the authority figure than like any like close knit or loving relationship. And so I don't think it's a bad mom because all her child's needs are met, even the emotional ones, with her nanny. Her nanny's very caring and kind of fills that mom role for her. And so, like I said, I don't think it necessarily makes her a bad mom, but it is damaging to the relationship for sure. And then the last question for chapter 1 is after the incident, Adrian asks about her father. Do you think Lena gave an appropriate response? And I actually do. I think it's really important to be honest with children in an age appropriate way. And while Lena does mention she kind of speaks to her daughter as an adult, she also is mindful and keeps out certain details that aren't appropriate for Adrian to know. So I think, she was honest, which a lot of people kind of discredit children and aren't honest. And Adrian's also very kind of mature for her age, and so I think if she had given her like a fluff answer, I don't think that would have been enough for Adrian. So I think it was an appropriate response because she was honest and open about her history with this guy, but at the same time, she left out details that Adrian just did not need to know at all. So I do, but let me know what you guys think. So we're going to go ahead and move on to chapter 2 now, which is they're headed to the grandparents' house, so it's a small town, and it's kind of Lena narrating it at first. Um, but Lena discusses her career roots in her unplanned pregnancy. If she hadn't built her brand off of this, do you think she could have been as successful? And I honestly think she could have. She kind of lists like her different strengths and why she was able to be so successful. And it wasn't just because of the unplanned pregnancy. I mean, that's what she built her brand around. But I think if she had decided to start a fitness brand, she could have been just as successful without the pregnancy. And so I think, the pregnancy kind of influenced what the brand became, but I think she would have been just as successful without it. It would just been a different kind of brand. Is my thoughts on it. So again, let me know what you guys think. And then the next question is Lena makes it very clear she was never one for small town life and was always attracted to travel and cities. What do you prefer? Fast paced cities and travel, small towns, or somewhere in between? And I just thought this was a good time, to kind of get to know each other. And are you more of Alina, where you like the city and the travel and the fast pace, or are you more like the grandparents, where you like small town life and those connections? Or are you kind of like Adrian? I definitely, at this point we don't see that, but I think going forward we'll see that she's kind of in between. She definitely likes the small town, but she can kind of thrive in the fast pace as well. And so I'm definitely kind of in between. But I'm closer to the small town life than the cities. I definitely like, slower pace of small towns and such, but I like being close enough to a small city, not a big city, but a small city that I can, go there, if I want some entertainment or to go out to eat to different restaurants or, hit different stores or things like that. But I don't like big cities at all. So that's kind of my take on it. But I would love to know what you guys prefer. If you're kind of more small town or big city and travel, or somewhere in between, definitely let me know. And then the next one is those around Lena disapprove of her leaving Adrian for the summer, especially so soon after the incident. Do you agree with them? And I don't. I see where they're coming from. I definitely see where they're coming from. But I think based on kind of who Lena is and already her relationship with her daughter, I think for her to heal, it was important to go back, get to work. But she recognized that for her daughter to heal, she needed to kind of be kept away from that. And so she took her to a place where she knew she would be kept safe. Um, Her parents are very loving and warm, and so she would get what she needed from them because she couldn't provide that for her daughter. And she does recognize that. I mean, I think that's an important point is she recognizes that she's not very motherly, but she makes sure that there's people in Lena's life, or Adrian rather. I'm gonna mix up the names, just get used to it now, but she does recognize there's people in Adrian's life that can provide that for her. And so I think based on what they both needed, she did make the appropriate choice. But I do see where the other people are coming from, understanding that typically, yes, a child would need their mom, especially after an event like that. But that's just my thoughts on the matter. And then my next question is, do you think Lena is purely benefiting from the publicity from the incident, or will it help other women? And because her father kind of called her out on it, and she mentioned that other women get bruises and other kids end up in casts. And I personally think she's smart enough to recognize that she can use the publicity to her advantage to build kind of her business even more. And honestly, I don't think her situation is so vastly different from the majority of women that are abused that I don't think it's necessarily something that she can relate with to other women. But I do also think it's important, you know, for people in the limelight to kind of acknowledge their struggle, because sometimes they can paint this picture perfect life, and that's not always the case. So I think it is going to benefit other women. You see, you know, what she overcame and such, but at the same time, I think it's more, you know, she's going to benefit from the publicity, than truly helping other women. So that's kind of my take on it, especially because she, you know, she wasn't in this relationship. She hadn't seen this guy for 7 years. And so, you know, it's very different from other women who are in abusive relationships and things like that. So that's kind of my take. And the last question for chapter 2 is, we are introduced to Jan and Raylan. How do you think their relationship compares to the relationship between Lena and Adrian? And I think Jan is a very hands-on mom. You see, you know, there's definitely, they're both making sure that they do what they need to give their kids what they need. And so like Jan brings her kid to work and makes sure he's doing his homework, where Lena provides Mimi to ensure, you know, that her Lena or Adrian's gonna get her education and make sure, you know, her homework's done and things like that. So I do think it's very two different approaches, and there are some similarities to them. But Jan is definitely very hands on, and you know, you see her joking around with Raylan and, you know, pretending to kiss him. And he's a 10-year-old boy, so that's embarrassing, but he kind of gets a kick out of it too. And so you definitely see the different approaches there. And it's different lifestyles though again too. So it's not just that Jan's more hands on. It's a completely different lifestyle where she can bring her kid to work, and it's not a big deal because she's still able to work and he's there being taken care of as well. So kind of different lifestyle, but I do see, and Lena could take Adrian to work because she owns the business, so she can kind of make the rules, but she's more focused on her career, so she brings somebody in to provide for Adrian, where Jan is definitely hands-on. So that was it for chapter 2. Let's go ahead and move on to chapter 3, where we kind of talk about Adrian and her summer with her grandparents. And so the first one is Adrian talks about meeting Maya and having a best friend for the first time. How important do you think it is for a child to have a close friend their own age? And I was somebody who kind of gravitated towards adult relationships. I didn't really fit in with my peers, but I always had one really close friend. So I personally think it's very important to have a close friend your own age because one, it gives you somebody to communicate with that's on your own level, and two, they can kind of help you navigate, you know, that age and your other peers and things like that. And so I do think it's very important to have a close friend that's on your own level that you can confide in and things like that. So, um, but again, let me know what you guys think. And then my next one is Raylan is upset and angry with the girls for snooping. He notices Adrian's reaction to him being angry and kind of modifies, how he's reacting to the girls. Do you think this is typical for a 10-year-old boy, or does it give us more of a glimpse of the character and the man he will become? And I personally, I mean, I don't know many 10-year-old boys, but I don't think it's very typical for boys to be overly concerned, especially not with like his sister's little friend. Um, so the fact that he recognizes that she's kind of, cringing because he's upset, I think definitely not only not only recognizes it, but then he modifies his reaction to the girls. I think it definitely shows the character that's being built and the man he's going to become. That compassion, and I don't know, but I think it will come into play. Later on in the book. I definitely think it's kind of a foreshadowing of the man he's going to become, and when we get reintroduced to him later on. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. And then the next question is, even being upset about leaving and wanting to run to Mimi first, Adrian shows clear restraint and knowledge of what is expected of her as she walks to greet her mother first. Why do you think this is? And I think, Adrian's very self aware, and Lena has set clear kind of expectations for her and their relationship. And so she recognizes that it's appropriate to go to her mother first, but she also recognizes that her mother wouldn't appreciate being like ran to and overtly show of affection. And so I think that's, shows a lot of self-awareness on her part, but also kind of shows the relationship that and the expectations her mother has set for her. And she recognizes that. So she walks calmly to her mother, greets her first as is appropriate, because I think Lena takes a lot of stock in what's appropriate. And then after she greets her mother, she runs to Mimi excitedly, and so I think that definitely shows the different relationship. And Lena's, I'm assuming, because it doesn't mention she gets upset or anything, and the fact that Adrian is so self-aware to walk to her first and greet her first and then run to Mimi kind of shows that maybe Lena doesn't get upset, with the affection between Adrian and Mimi. And so I think it just kind of shows the expectation that Lena has put in place and the self awareness and the maturity that Adrian has, is kind of what I took from it. So, and then we jump in chapter 3 to just before Adrian turns 17. She still handwrites letters to her grandparents weekly, along with calls, texts, and emails. How does this show the closeness of their relationship compared to when she was apart from her mother? And I think the key part, and she even mentions this, is the fact that she handwrites letters because it's more personal. And so she's communicating with them, but she still takes the time to handwrite those letters. And that just shows how much value she has for her relationship with her grandparents and the closeness that is there, versus when she was spent the summer at her grandparents and her mom was separated. They just called once a week. Like, that's all they did. They called once a week. There was no emails. I mean, she was a lot younger too, but still, there was no emails or text, and there was definitely no, handwritten letters. And so it definitely shows, again, that structured relationship versus that closeness she has with her grandparents. And then, at shy of 17, Adrian takes the stand to stay put while her mom goes on tour. She is allowed to do so. Do you think this was appropriate? And I say, generally speaking, no. But based on the situation and the characters involved, I think it was appropriate. Again, Adrian is very mature. She's not going to be going out partying, drinking, things like that. And her mom recognizes that. She kind of sets down some rules. And then, her assistant who was formerly Adrian's nanny, is still staying in the city, and so she's right there to check in on Adrian, and so there is a person there, and it's not unsimilar. When I was that age, my mom would travel to horse shows and such, and I would kind of be left alone. But my mom's boss's husband would be there with his kids oftentimes, and so even though they were in a different household, they were right there and could kind of check in on me and such. And so I do recognize that. I think it just depends on the relationship and the maturity level of the child and how much trust you can have in them at that age. And especially given the situation, she just started a new school, and she brought up a lot of valid points on why she should stay put. And I think the fact that she had those valid points, and it wasn't just like, I just don't want to go and I want to do my own thing. She had valid reasons why she should be able to stay. And I think that really was appropriate. I think they made the right choice there as well. So now we are on to chapter 4. And so this again, Lena's around 16, 17. She's just shy of turning 17. And on her own, Adrian still follows her morning routine, including doing dishes and making her bed. Would you have been so responsible at 16/17? And I actually was very mature at that age. And like I said, my mom would travel to horse shows and I would be on my own. But I wouldn't be doing dishes and making the bed. I was responsible enough to do the chores that were necessary and I needed to do. But I wasn't going to be spending time on little chores like that for sure. And even now, it's not important to me. So I don't think, no. But at the same time, I was mature enough and responsible enough to be kind of left on my own to take care of myself. So I think yes, but I wouldn't have been quite as responsible as Lena to do all the little chores. But again, I think that kind of speaks to her personality, and what's important to her as well. She kind of was raised that way, where my mom was a little bit more relaxed. So, but I was pretty mature. But what about you guys? Would you have done all the little tedious chores? Were you not mature enough at all to be left alone? I would love to know. So. And then next, Adrian's version of breaking from routine and breaking the rules is to reach out to some students and invite them to her home to work on a personal project. How do you think this is both rebelling and also speaks to her mother's influence? And I think this is definitely rebelling a little bit because she brings people in when her mother specifically told her, only these certain people can come into the home. And she's bringing new friends, one that she doesn't know very well, and two, when her mother specifically said not to. And so it is a little bit of rebellion, but at the same time, she's doing it for a project because she's at this point trying to start her own brand, that's separate from her mother. And so I do think that speaks to her mother's influence because that drive and that ambition is already there and starting to take root. And so that's why she's breaking the rules, is to create this project, which I think is something that Lena would probably really respect too. So that kind of speaks to her influence because, I mean, Lena definitely wouldn't let something stop her just because on her way to build her brand or anything like that. So I think it's definitely something that Lena could respect and relate to as well. And then next is Adrian specifically targets Hector and the nerd group, going so far as researching each person for the purpose of getting them to help with her project. Do you think Adrian is as career focused and ambitious as her mother? And I kind of touched on that on my last answer, but I do think she is. Like, I think she has that drive and that ambition, which it's definitely influenced by her mother. You know, and so she has that already instilled in her. So yeah, I do think she's as ambitious as her mother, but at the same time, she's not quite as focused because while her mother, is so focused on her career that relationships kind of go to the wayside. Adrian's also been able to build relationships, So I also think that speaks to some of the influence from the other people in her life as well. And then next kind of goes back to one of the first questions I asked. And sodas and chips not being allowed is brought up multiple times. Do you think Lena would be more upset about Adrian bringing friends into the apartment or by the soda and chips they were snacking on? And I think, again, I kind of already touched on this. I think on a personal level, Lena would be able to respect why Adrian broke the rules and brought these people in to work on this project. She would be able to respect kind of that drive and that ambition. Where I don't think she would be okay with Adrian snacking on sodas and chips and such. I think to her that would kind of be akin to underage drinking a little bit. Because it has been brought up so many times, even in the first chapter, how restrictive she is about those types of things. And so I do think that she would probably be more upset about that than the fact that Adrian broke the rules by bringing friends into the apartment. So that's kind of my take on it, but I would love to hear what you guys think. And then the last question for chapter 4 and of this section of the book is, even though she was calculating in her approach to Hector, Tisha, and Lauren, Adrian was genuinely able to connect with to them. Why do you think this is? And I really think it's the influence of her grandparents and Mimi. I don't think, if she had those loving and nurturing people, and she also made a friendship with Maya as well. And so she had that, in her life. And I don't think if she had that, that she would have been able to make relationships so easily. And so I do think it's kind of the influence of the other people in her life as well, that allows her to make connections and make friends, even though going in she was very calculating, kind of like her mother is. So that's kind of my thoughts. Again, let me know what you guys think, what your thoughts are to these questions down in the comments below. I will leave the questions in a list so that way if you need to reference back to anything, you can do that pretty easily. But I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. The next set of chapters that we are going to be reading is also in the description below. We're going to be reading chapters 5, 6, 7, and 8 this week. And we will see you guys next Monday to discuss those chapters. Bye, everybody.